Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, and at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The improvised consultation room occupied the south terrace of the mansion overlooking San Francisco Bay. 3 panoramic windows let in golden autumn light that Marcus Ashford had learned to despise, because it illuminated far too clearly everything he could no longer do. He was in the wheelchair, as always. A quickie tie light in graphite, the most expensive on the market because Marcus did nothing halfway, positioned strategically so the angle of his body suggested absolute disinterest. His fingers drummed against the armrest in an irritated rhythm he couldn't control. "Dr. Chen was here on Monday," said Marcus, not even lifting his eyes from his phone. "And Friday. And every Monday and Friday for the last 8 months. The nurse, Sandra, a woman in her early 50s with the kind of patience that came from decades of caring for rich, arrogant men, simply smiled while adjusting the table beside him. Water glasses, a notepad, the blue folder containing all his exams, MRIs, CT scans, blood work that cost more than a small car. "This one is different, Mr. Ashford," she said, with that maternal tone Marcus hated even more than the wheelchair itself. "Of course it is," he retorted, his tone dry as desert sand. Marcus Ashford was 35 years old, dark brown hair just beginning to silver at the temples, a detail he had obsessively colored until 2 months ago when he simply stopped caring about such things. His face was the kind you saw in business magazines, defined jawline, eyes gray as stainless steel, the lines around his eyes suggesting either sharp intelligence or profound cynicism, probably both. He wore a pearl gray cashmere sweater that cost more than Sandra's monthly salary, and that was just the visible part. Below the waist, there was only the darkness of a body he pretended didn't exist. 2 years. 2 years since the car accident on a wet road near Big Sur. 2 years since his Porsche 911 decided that physics was a suggestion rather than a law. 2 years since Marcus learned that some damage has no repair, or at least none he was willing to attempt. "She comes highly recommended," Sandra continued, organizing papers with that calm efficiency Marcus never asked for but kept receiving. "Graduated from Stanford, did her residency in Boston, specialist in spinal cord surgery." "I don't need another surgery," said Marcus, finally lifting his eyes. "I don't need anything else, actually. What I need is less, fewer doctors, fewer consultations, fewer people in my house trying to help." Sandra ignored the edge in his tone, because she always did. That was her irritating superpower. "Her name is Dr. Elena Rojas. This is her first time doing home consultations. Usually people have to go to her office in Pacific Heights." Marcus laughed, a sound without humor. "Oh, great. Because now I'm a medical celebrity. I'll put that on my LinkedIn." Before Sandra could respond, the intercom buzzed. She excused herself and left through the glass door, leaving Marcus alone with the view and his thoughts, which were about as suitable a companion as tedium itself. He rolled the wheelchair closer to the window. Down there, the Bay Bridge cut across the water in perfect lines. Tourists, winners, people who had functioning legs and functioning lives. Marcus had won before, built an asset management app now used by 70% of Fortune 500 companies, had traveled, had dated models and actresses and women whose surnames were bigger than their IQs, had everything, and now he had a wheelchair and a terrace. Hell of a view. Marcus turned so fast he nearly tipped the chair over. She was standing in the doorway, and immediately his brain registered 3 things almost simultaneously. First, that she wasn't what he expected. Second, that she was speaking with the kind of casual confidence usually reserved for people who just won the lottery. And third, that something in his chest had just tightened in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with his spine. Elena Rojas was tall, maybe 5'10", with the kind of posture that suggested she'd never considered slouching as an option. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a high ponytail that swung when she moved, and her skin had that warm, honey-brown tone that spoke of Mexican heritage. She wore dark jeans, a white button-down shirt, with the sleeves rolled up past her elbows, and white sneakers. Actual sneakers, the kind someone wore because they were comfortable, not because they cost $400 and came with a personal trainer. She was not what he expected, and he absolutely hated that. What he hated more, however, was that she was looking at his terrace with genuine appreciation, not pity. There was no sympathy in her dark brown eyes, no careful measurement of his chair, no that poor man energy radiating from her body. She was simply looking at the view like a person who understood good real estate. "The bridge is better at sunset," he said flatly. "But you probably won't be here to see it." If the edge in his voice bothered her, she didn't show it. Instead, she turned from the window and extended her hand across the space between them. She had strong hands, surgeon's hands probably, with short practical nails, painted a deep burgundy. "Dr. Elena Rojas," she said, "and I'm guessing you're the charming Mr. Ashford everyone warned me about?" Marcus didn't take her hand immediately. He let it hang there for a moment, a small power play, the kind of thing he could still do. Finally, with deliberate slowness, he reached up and shook it. Her grip was firm, not the careful, gentle thing most people offered him. "Charming," he repeated. "Let me guess, Sandra used that word." "Sandra said you were direct," Elena said, pulling a chair closer and settling into it with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in her own skin. "I'm inferring the charming part. It's a gift I have. I can usually tell when someone's being an asshole as a defense mechanism versus genuine assholeness. You, Mr. Ashford, are definitely the former." Marcus blinked. In the past 2 years, he'd been treated by some of the best doctors on the West Coast. They had all, without exception, maintained professional distance, gentle voices, and the kind of respectful hesitation usually reserved for funeral home directors. None of them had ever called him an asshole, even when he'd earned it, which was often. "That's quite a diagnosis," he said slowly. "For someone who's been in my presence for approximately 40 seconds. 45, Elena corrected, pulling out a small tablet from her bag. "And I didn't say it was a diagnosis. I said it was an observation. Big difference. A diagnosis would require actual medical expertise. Observation just requires attention to the fact that you've spent the last minute trying to make me feel unwelcome because you don't want to be here, and you're hoping that if you're enough of a bastard, I'll leave, and you can go back to your view and your expensive furniture and whatever self-pity project you're currently running." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that had weight. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something that wasn't quite anger, though it had anger's shape. It was more like surprise, the kind you felt when you were expecting ice and got heat instead. "You're very rude for someone trying to convince me to let them cut me open," he said finally. "I'm not trying to convince you of anything," Elena said, tapping her tablet awake. "I'm here because your mother is paying me a significant amount of money to do a consultation. During this consultation, I'm going to ask you some questions, examine your mobility range, review your medical history, and explain what a spinal reconstruction surgery could realistically achieve for you. Then you're going to tell me no, because everyone tells me no, and I'm going to take a check from your very nice mother, and we're both going to move on with our lives." "My mother is here." Marcus felt a spike of irritation. "She said she was in Napa." She was. She flew back yesterday specifically to schedule this. Elena looked up from her tablet, and there was something almost pitying in her expression now, though it was a different kind of pity than he was used to. "She loves you, you know, even though you're currently being a nightmare about it." "I'm not being a nightmare," Marcus said coldly. "I'm being realistic. Spinal reconstruction surgery has a success rate of approximately 40%. Of those 40%, most regain only limited mobility. I'd go through months of recovery, physical therapy that would be agony, all for the possibility of maybe being able to feel my legs again without actually being able to walk. The math doesn't work. Elena nodded, making notes. Okay, and how's that working out for you? The accepting thing. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. She looked around the terrace, then back at him. You're a guy who built an empire, who probably ran meetings where you were the smartest person in the room, or at least you thought you were, who liked control, liked winning, liked being in charge. And now you're in a situation where you can't control the outcome, can't guarantee a win, and can't be in charge of your own body. So instead of trying and failing, you've just decided not to try at all, which is smart in a cowardly sort of way. Marcus felt heat rise up the back of his neck. You've been here for 5 minutes. 5 minutes and 43 seconds, Elena said. And in that time, I've learned that you're brilliant with math, which is probably why you're so good at constructing these logical arguments for why you shouldn't even attempt surgery. But here's what your mathematical brain isn't factoring in: the cost of not trying. You're not just choosing comfort, Mr. Ashford. You're choosing stagnation. You're choosing to spend the next 60 years in that chair, in that mansion, with that view, telling yourself it's a reasonable decision. Maybe it is. Maybe, Eleanor agreed, standing up. She walked to the window and looked out at the bay. But I don't think you actually believe that. I think you're terrified, which is completely reasonable. But you're dressing it up in logic because that makes it easier to live with. And the tragedy, the real tragedy, isn't that you're in a wheelchair. It's that you're not even fighting anymore. Marcus said nothing. In the silence, he could hear the distant sound of foghorns from the bay, the wind moving through the eucalyptus trees on the property, the careful nothing of his own carefully constructed life. I want to examine your mobility range, Elena said, turning back to face him. Just the basic stuff, nothing invasive. And then I want you to think about what I said, not the medical stuff. The other thing. And if I refuse? Elena smiled, a real smile, not a professional one. It changed her entire face. Then I'll tell your mother you were a nightmare. She'll be disappointed and I'll still get paid. But you'll go back to knowing that you had a choice and you chose not to take it. That's going to stay with you way longer than any surgery recovery ever will. She was right. And Marcus absolutely hated that she was right. The examination took 47 minutes. Elena was methodical in a way that felt clinical without being cold. She tested his range of motion in his upper body, asked him to perform tasks that seemed simple until they weren't. Pushing a weighted ball, reaching across his body, holding positions that made his shoulders burn. She made notes. She asked questions about pain levels, about sensation, about what he could and couldn't feel below the waist. And she didn't apologize once. Most doctors, all the other doctors, had treated the examination like an apology. They moved carefully around him, as if his body was something fragile, something that might shatter if they weren't gentle enough. There was always an undertone of, "I'm sorry this is necessary. I'm sorry you're broken. I'm sorry I have to touch you." Elena touched him like he was a person, like his body was simply a body. Damaged, yes, but not shameful, not tragic. It was infuriating. "You've been working with a physical therapist," she said, not a question. She was reviewing his chart now, her dark eyes scanning the pages with the focus of someone who actually understood what they were reading. 3 times a week, Marcus confirmed. "It's not helping." "Actually, it is," Eleanor said, tapping the page. "Your upper body strength has increased significantly over the past 6 months. Your grip strength is better than 90% of men your age. Your core stability is impressive, especially considering how little you're probably moving otherwise." "Impressive for a cripple," Marcus said flatly. Eleanor looked up, and her expression shifted into something harder. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "That thing where you insult yourself before anyone else can. It's cowardly, and you're clearly not a coward. At least, you weren't before the accident." Marcus felt something flare in his chest. Anger, mostly, but underneath it something else, something like shame. "How would you know what I was before?" "I wouldn't," Elena said, setting the chart down on the table. But I know what you are now, and it's not someone who deserves to talk about himself that way, even if everyone else in your life is too polite to call you out on it. Sandra knocked softly on the glass door then, appearing with a tray of coffee and pastries. She had that carefully neutral expression of someone who'd heard at least some of the conversation and had chosen not to acknowledge it. "Thank you, Sandra," Eleanor said warmly, taking a cup and a croissant. "These look amazing. Did you make them?" "This morning," Sandra said, and Marcus could see her soften slightly under Elena's genuine attention. "It's a recipe my daughter taught me." "Your daughter is a baker? A pastry chef? She has a place in Oakland." Elena lit up. "No, really. What's the name? I'm always looking for good bakeries." "Dum." The two women proceeded to have a 5-minute conversation about sourdough starters and the difference between French and Italian pastry techniques, and Marcus watched with a strange feeling he couldn't quite name. It was like watching someone speak a language he'd forgotten he ever knew. Eventually, Sandra left, and Elena settled back in her chair with her coffee, crossing her legs in a way that suggested she had nowhere else to be. The afternoon light had shifted slightly, making her skin glow amber. "Your mother is worried about you," Elena said conversationally. "My mother worries about everything. Last week she was convinced I had scurvy." "Scurvy?" Elena repeated, a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "That's a new one." She saw something on a Netflix documentary. Now she's convinced that my wheelchair-bound lifestyle is deficient in vitamin C. Despite everything, Elena laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded, genuine, the kind that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "That's actually kind of sweet, in a completely misguided way." "It's annoying." "It's because she loves you," Eleanor said, and there was no judgment in her voice, just statement. "My mother does the same thing. Last month she was convinced that my job was causing my ovaries to die. She left medical journals on my kitchen counter. 'How old are you?' The question came out before Marcus could stop it. 32, Elena said, and before you start doing the math in your head, yes, I'm young for this specialty. Yes, people are constantly surprised, and yes, I'm still really, really good at my job, so the surprise is usually misplaced. I wasn't going to say you weren't good at your job," Marcus said. "No, but you were thinking it. Most people do. Young woman, Latina, doesn't look like she belongs in a room full of old white male surgeons." She sipped her coffee. "I'm used to it. It actually makes my job easier. People underestimate me, which means they're usually shocked when I'm smarter than they are. It's a useful advantage." There was no bitterness in the way she said it, just pragmatism. Marcus found himself oddly fascinated. "Why did you become a surgeon?" he asked. Elena was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the bay, and something shifted in her expression, the professional mask slipping for just a second to reveal something deeper underneath. "When I was 16, my older brother had a motorcycle accident," she said quietly. "He crashed on the 101 near San Jose. Everyone thought he was going to be paralyzed. Complete spinal injury, very similar to yours, actually. But his surgeon, Dr. James Whitney, total asshole, by the way, but brilliant, he did a reconstruction surgery that was considered experimental at the time. My brother spent 8 months in physical therapy. It was brutal, but he walked again. He's married now, has 2 kids, teaches high school physics." She turned back to Marcus, and her eyes were steady. "I became a surgeon because I saw what it was possible to fix. And I've spent the last 15 years studying to become very, very good at fixing it. So when I walk into a room with someone like you, someone who has the resources, the health, the medical support, the actual possibility of improvement, and they've decided not to try, it bothers me. Not because I think you owe me or the world anything, but because I've seen people with so much less than you fighting like hell for the chance you're just throwing away." The silence that followed was different from before. This silence had depth. "I'm not throwing anything away," Marcus said slowly. "I'm being realistic." "You're being afraid," Elena said. "And again, that's legitimate, but don't dress it up as realism. Fear is fear, and realism is something else entirely. Marcus set his coffee down carefully. Even if I wanted the surgery, which I'm not saying I do, the success rate is still only 40%. Those aren't great odds. Depends on your perspective, Elena said. For some people, 40% is terrible. For others, it's better than zero. You know what I know? I know that in 6 months, without intervention, your mobility will probably decline. Your muscle density will decrease despite physical therapy. Your quality of life will continue to narrow, and in 10 years, you'll still be here on this terrace, but there will be less of it you can access. That's also a percentage. Would you like to know what that one is? Let me guess, you're going to tell me anyway. 98%, Elena said. That's the likelihood that without attempting the surgery, your condition deteriorates significantly within the next decade. So you're willing to accept a 98% certainty of decline, but you won't accept a 40% possibility of improvement. The math actually doesn't work in favor of your current approach, Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to find a flaw in her logic, a way to win this conversation the way he'd won 1,000 others. But he couldn't, and the fact that he couldn't felt like another kind of loss. Why do you care? He asked instead. If everyone tells you no, if you already know what the outcome will be, why do you care if I'm one more no? Elena was quiet for a long moment. She watched the light shift across the bay, watched a sailboat move slowly through the water. Because you're not everyone, she said finally. Everyone else who tells me no is making peace with their situation. They're adjusting, they're accepting reality. But you're not accepting anything. You're just hibernating. You're waiting for something, and I can't figure out what. Maybe you're waiting to feel like trying. Maybe you're waiting for your old life back. Maybe you're just waiting to die. Jesus Christ, Marcus said. I'm serious, Elena said. And she was. Her tone had lost any edge and become genuinely concerned. You're a brilliant man with every resource in the world at your disposal, and you're just giving up. And I've learned that giving up doesn't actually make pain go away. It just makes it slower, more constant. It becomes the background radiation of your entire existence. She stood, gathering her things. It was a dismissal, and somehow that made it hurt more, like she was leaving, because she'd already decided he wasn't worth saving. I'm going to send your mother a full report, Elena said. I'm going to recommend the surgery. I'm going to tell her that you're an excellent candidate, that your recovery timeline would be reasonable, that your age and overall health work in your favor. I'm going to tell her that I think you could regain significant mobility, possibly even independent walking with assistive devices. And I'm going to tell her that you'll probably say no. Because I will, Marcus said. Because you will, Elena agreed. But here's the thing, I'm also going to leave you my personal number, and I'm going to ask you to call me if you change your mind. Not because I think you will, but because sometimes people need to sit with the decision for a while before they realize it's the wrong one. Sometimes it takes hearing it from someone who isn't your mother, isn't a professional, isn't trying to make money off you. She was at the door now, her silhouette backlit by the afternoon sun. Your mother loves you, Marcus, even though you're being a nightmare about it, and maybe that's worth something. She left before he could respond. Marcus sat alone on the terrace for a long time after she left. The sun moved lower on the horizon, turning the bay into molten gold. He could hear the evening sounds of the city, traffic, distant sirens, the call of foghorns. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. For 2 years, he'd resisted writing anything about the accident, the injury, the way it felt to be trapped in his own body. But now, with Elena's words still echoing in his head, he found himself typing, she said, I'm hibernating, like I'm waiting for something. Maybe I am. Maybe I've been waiting to not be afraid. He deleted it immediately. But he didn't delete her number, which Sandra had texted him along with the consultation summary. He stared at it for a long time, his thumb hovering over the contact screen. He didn't call, but he also didn't delete. 3 days passed. Marcus didn't call Elena. He didn't think about Elena except for the approximately 600 times per day that he found himself thinking about her. He didn't replay the conversation on the terrace, except for every single moment of it, in chronological order, sometimes backwards, sometimes in fragments that appeared unbidden while he was trying to focus on quarterly reports, or the news, or literally anything else. What he did do was request that Sandra stop making those damn croissants. "They remind me of that consultation," he said, when Sandra looked hurt. "Oh," she said, understanding immediately. "You mean they remind you that you're thinking about the doctor?" "That's not what I said." "No, but it's what you meant." Sandra had worked for him for 7 years. She knew him in the way that long-time employees know their employers. She could read his moods, his patterns, his lies. It was deeply annoying. On Friday morning, Marcus woke up to find his mother in his kitchen. Margaret Ashford was 63 years old, had been a corporate lawyer before retiring to spend her time on charity boards and worrying about her only child. She was tall like her son, with the same steel-grey eyes, though hers were usually warmer. Today, they looked determined. "Hello, darling," she said, kissing the top of his head as he wheeled himself to the breakfast bar. "I was in the city for a board meeting, so I thought I'd stop by. You were in Napa 2 days ago," Marcus said flatly. "I was," Margaret agreed, arranging herself on a stool with the kind of casual grace that came from a lifetime of formal dinners and country club luncheons. "But I had to come back for this." She slid a folder across the counter. It was thick, professional, clearly prepared by someone with medical expertise. "Dr. Rojas's full report," Margaret said. "I read it 3 times. And then I read the studies she referenced. And then I called my friend Catherine, whose husband is a neurologist at UCSF, and I had her read it." "Mother, let me finish," Margaret interrupted, and there was steel in her voice now. The corporate lawyer voice, the one she used when she meant business. "Catherine says that everything Dr. Rojas said is accurate. She says that the success rate for spinal reconstruction surgery in cases like yours is actually closer to 50% now, not 40, because techniques have improved. She says that your age and overall health are significant advantages. And she says that if she were in your position, she would do the surgery." Marcus opened the folder. The report was detailed, professional, and damning. Elena had laid out everything. His current state, his projected decline, the realistic outcomes of surgery, the recovery timeline, the physical therapy requirements, the potential complications, the potential benefits. It was balanced and thorough and absolutely designed to convince him. It was also clearly written with care. The language wasn't cold, it was human. "I'm not doing the surgery," Marcus said. "Why not?" Margaret's voice was quiet now, which was worse than when it was loud. "Because the odds are still against me. Because recovery would be brutal. Because there's no guarantee." "There's never a guarantee," Margaret interrupted. "That's not how life works, Marcus. That's not how anything works. You built a company on risk assessment. You knew the odds were against you, and you did it anyway. You took chances. You fought for things. And now you're telling me that you won't fight for yourself?" "It's different," Marcus said, but the words felt thin even as he said them. How? He didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, and all of them sounded like excuses when he imagined saying them out loud. Margaret reached across the counter and took his hand. Her skin was soft, papery with age, and her grip was firm. "I'm not going to make you do anything," she said. "You're an adult. It's your body, your decision, your life, but I want you to understand what you're choosing. You're choosing to spend the next 60 years in that chair, telling yourself it was the responsible choice. And I don't think that's brave, Marcus. I think it's the opposite of brave." She said it gently, which made it worse. After she left, promising to visit again next week, clearly planning to use repetition as a strategy, Marcus sat alone in the kitchen, staring at Elena's report. He didn't read it. He already knew what it said. Instead, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in 2 years. He pulled up his old calendar. Before the accident, his life had been color-coded. Red for business meetings, blue for travel, green for personal time. His personal time was usually consumed by work anyway, but there were moments, dinners with friends, a hiking trip in Yosemite, a weekend in Vegas for a friend's bachelor party, a concert at the Fillmore. The colors stopped abruptly on August 15th, 2 years ago. Since then, his calendar was nearly blank. Physical therapy appointments, doctor's visits, conference calls that he could have delegated to anyone else but didn't, because at least work existed in a space where he could still excel, still compete, still win. He closed the calendar. That evening, Sandra brought him dinner. Salmon, roasted vegetables, the kind of meal designed for someone with no appetite. She set it down and hesitated. "The doctor called," Sandra said carefully. "She wanted to know how you were doing. I told her you were fine." Marcus looked up sharply. "When did she call?" "This afternoon. She said she was following up with all her recent consultations." Sandra was lying. He could tell by the way she was arranging the place settings with more precision than necessary. Elena had probably called specifically, asking about him. The thought should have annoyed him. Instead, it made his chest tight. "Did she say anything else?" "She asked if you'd read the report," Sandra said. "I told her I wasn't sure. She said that if you had any questions, to call her any time, day or night." Those were her exact words. "That's just professionalism," Marcus said. "That's more than professionalism," Sandra corrected gently. She finished setting the table and paused at his shoulder. "You know, my daughter, the pastry chef, she told me something once. She said that most people are just trying to do something meaningful. And when they find someone worth trying for, they usually try, even if it's scary." "Is this the daughter Elena talked to for 5 minutes?" "The very same," Sandra said, and she was smiling. "She also said that if a smart, beautiful woman calls you specifically to check on your well-being, you should probably think about what that means. It means she's a good doctor who follows up with her patients." "Sure," Sandra said, in the tone of someone who knew better but wasn't going to push. "That must be it." She left him alone with his salmon and his thoughts. That night, Marcus found himself pulling up Elena's contact information. He stared at the phone number for a long time. It was 9:45 p.m. Too late to call. Too late to pretend it was a professional inquiry. He put the phone down. He picked it back up. He deleted her contact information. Then at 11:37 p.m., he pulled up his chat history with Sandra and asked her to resend the number. He didn't call that night either, but on Saturday morning, after lying awake for most of the night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He got up before sunrise. Well, he didn't get up. He rolled himself to the eastern terrace of the mansion, the one that faced directly toward the hills. Sandra had helped him with the transfer, asking no questions, and he'd positioned himself to watch the light change. The sky went from black to deep blue to purple to pink to orange. The bay shifted from dark mirror to silver to gold. The city woke up slowly, lights coming on in distant windows, traffic increasing on the streets below, the sound of morning foghorns. And in that quiet space between night and day, Marcus found himself thinking about Elena's words. "Maybe you're just waiting to die." It was harsh, it was probably unfair, but it was also, he was beginning to realize, completely true. He'd been waiting to feel like trying, waiting to stop being afraid, waiting for the decision to feel easy, the way decisions had always felt easy before, when he was winning, when he was in control, when he didn't have to be brave because nothing had ever required bravery. But this required bravery. This required accepting that he might fail, that recovery might be brutal, that even with surgery he might still be in pain, might still be limited, might still have a fundamentally altered life. And also, this required accepting that doing nothing was guaranteed failure, that avoidance was actually the most dangerous choice of all. The sun broke over the hills. It was blindingly beautiful. Marcus pulled out his phone. He dialed Elena's number before he could change his mind. She answered on the second ring, and he could hear the surprise in her voice. "Marcus," she said. "Hi, I wasn't expecting you to call." "I know," he said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, raw, uncertain. "I'm still terrified." "Okay," Elena said. She sounded awake despite the early hour, alert, present. "That's good. Terrified is good. Terrified means you're actually considering something real." "If I do this," Marcus said, "if I actually call you and say yes to the surgery, I need to know something." "What? Was any of that in the consultation, in the report, in checking on me? Was any of it about me specifically? Or is this just what you do? Do you call all your patients at night? Do you push all of them this hard?" There was a pause. Marcus could hear the sound of the city behind her. She wasn't at home then. She was already awake, already moving through her day. "No," Elena said finally. "I don't call all my patients. I don't push all of them. Mostly, I give my recommendations, and I accept the decisions people make. It's their body, their life, their choice. So why are you pushing me?" "Because," Elena said, and her voice was softer now, less professional, more honest. "Because I think you're someone worth pushing for, and because I think you know that you deserve better than hibernation, even if you're not ready to admit it yet." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "I want to see you again," he said, "not for a consultation, for something else." "What else?" Elena's voice was careful now, cautious. "I don't know yet," Marcus admitted. "But I think I need to know what it would look like if I said yes, not just to the surgery, to trying, to fighting, to whatever comes next." "Okay," Elena said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "When?" "Now," Marcus said. He looked out at the sunrise, at the light breaking across the bay. "Can you come now?" "I'm in Oakland," Elena said. "I have surgery scheduled at 10, but I could be there at 8 if you want." "I want," Marcus said. "Okay," Elena said. "Okay, I'll be there." The line went quiet, but not dead. They stayed connected for a moment, just breathing, just existing on opposite ends of the same invisible thread. "Marcus," Elena said finally, "are you sure about this?" "No," he said, and somehow that felt like the most honest thing he'd ever said to anyone. "Not at all, but I'm tired of waiting." San Francisco, Ashford Mansion, Saturday, October 18th. Elena arrived at 7:58 a.m., which meant she'd probably exceeded the speed limit somewhere on the Bay Bridge. She was wearing dark blue scrubs under an open leather jacket, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that suggested she'd gotten dressed in a hurry. There was coffee in her hand, actual coffee, not the careful herbal tea that most people brought to the house, and her dark eyes were alert, sharp, alive. She looked at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. "You look terrible," she said, walking straight to the kitchen and setting her coffee down. "Did you sleep?" "No," Marcus said. He was still in yesterday's clothes, positioned on the terrace where the sunrise had caught him. "I called you at sunrise." That felt significant, seemed wrong to waste it on sleep. Eleanor poured herself a glass of water from the pitcher Sandra always kept on the counter. "Significant in what way?" "In the way that I spent the last 2 years watching the same view, never actually seeing it," Marcus said. "This morning, I saw it." Elena nodded slowly, like she understood what he meant, without him having to explain further. She settled into the chair across from him, the same chair she'd sat in during the consultation, and crossed her legs. "So," she said, "you're doing the surgery?" It wasn't a question. "I'm considering the surgery," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Eleanor asked. Because from where I'm sitting, considering is just a nice word for yes, but I need someone to hold my hand through the admission that I'm terrified. Marcus smiled despite himself. Is that what we're doing? Hand-holding? Maybe, Elena said. She sipped her water thoughtfully. Tell me something. What changed between the consultation and now? Because I pushed you the same way then. I called you as unprofessional as possible without actually getting fired from my own practice. I left you that report, and you didn't call. So what's different about today? Marcus considered the question. He'd been awake long enough to ask it of himself about 50 times, and he still wasn't sure of the answer. My mother was here, he said finally. She told me that I was choosing avoidance instead of bravery. And then Sandra, my nurse, she told me about her daughter, the pastry chef, and how most people are just trying to do something meaningful. And then I read your report, actually read it, and I realized that you weren't trying to convince me to do something dangerous. You were trying to convince me to do something hard, and I've never backed down from hard things before. And now? Now I'm tired of running, Marcus said. I think I've been running since the accident. Running from the reality of it, from the pain, from the possibility that I could fight and still lose. Running feels safe, but it turns out safe is just another word for trapped. Elena was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the bay, where the light was already shifting into the full bright of morning. Somewhere in the city, people were starting their days, going to work, making decisions, living their lives at full volume. There's going to be pain, Elena said, not looking at him. Physical pain during recovery, emotional pain during rehabilitation. You're going to want to quit, probably multiple times. You're going to hate me. You're going to hate the physical therapists. You're going to hate yourself for agreeing to this. I know, Marcus said. And there's still a chance it won't work, Elena continued. The surgery could be a success, the rehabilitation could be textbook perfect, and you could still end up with limited mobility. You could end up exactly where you are now, but with months of recovery behind you and a fresh wound on your spine. I know that too. Elena finally looked at him, and her expression was serious in a way it hadn't been before. So why are you really doing this? Not the philosophical answer, the honest answer. Marcus felt the question like a weight. He'd been asking himself the same thing all night. Because, he said slowly, I think I've been looking at this all wrong. I've been asking, what if the surgery fails? What if I end up right back where I started? And I realize that I'm already back where I started. I've been sitting here for 2 years, not getting better, not getting worse, just existing. And at some point, existence becomes a choice. I'm choosing to not exist in that way anymore. And if it hurts, Elena asked. Then it hurts, Marcus said. At least I'll be alive enough to feel it. Something shifted in Elena's expression, a softening like she'd been holding tension and had just released it. Okay, she said. Then we do this, but we do it right. We do it smart. And we do it with the understanding that you're going to want to quit, and I'm going to push you not to. And that's not me being cruel. That's me being someone who actually gives a shit about your outcome. Is that professional? Marcus asked. Not even a little bit, Elena said. Which is why I'm telling you right now. Once you sign consent for the surgery, my behavior is going to change. I'm going to be your doctor, professional, distant, completely appropriate. This, she gestured between them, this stops. Because I can't be both. I can't be the person who pushes you to do the hard thing and also be the person who has other feelings about you. The words hung in the air between them like something physical. Other feelings, Marcus repeated. Don't, Elena said quickly. Don't make me say it more clearly. Not yet. Not while you're making the biggest medical decision of your life. That's too many variables. But after you're on the other side of surgery, after you've made progress in recovery, after you're not my patient anymore, then maybe we can figure out what this is. And if I don't make progress? Marcus asked. If the surgery is a failure, then at least you'll have tried, Elena said. And that will have to be enough. She stood, and Marcus could see the professional mask sliding back into place. Dr. Rojas, instead of Elena. Surgeon, instead of the woman who'd called him at sunrise and told him she gave a shit about his outcome. "I'm going to refer you to a surgical coordinator," Elena said, moving into clinical mode. "She'll schedule your preoperative workup, blood tests, imaging, psychological evaluation. The whole package. Once everything is cleared, we'll schedule the surgery for approximately 3 to 4 weeks out. The procedure itself is 6 to 8 hours. Recovery time in the hospital is about a week. Then rehabilitation for 6 to 12 months, depending on your progress. And you'll be the one doing the surgery," Marcus said. "Yes," Elena confirmed. "It needs to be me. No one else is going to care about your outcome the way I do, and you need someone in that operating room who wants you to win more than they want to be safe." She gathered her things, her water glass, her empty coffee cup, the leather jacket she'd draped over the chair. She was about to leave, and Marcus found himself panicking slightly. "Wait," he said. Elena turned back. "I need your number," Marcus said. "Your personal number, not your office line. In case I need to talk to you before the surgery, in case I start panicking and need someone to remind me why I'm doing this." "I gave you my number," Elena said. "You gave me your professional number," Marcus corrected. "I need the other one." Elena hesitated. Then she walked back to the kitchen, found a piece of paper, and wrote out 10 digits in black ink. She tore the paper in half and handed one piece to Marcus. "This is the number to my personal phone," she said. "You can call any time. But Marcus, don't call just to talk to me. Call because you need a doctor. Call because you're scared. Call because you need someone to remind you of why this matters. But don't call because you miss me or because you want to hear my voice. Can you do that?" "Probably not," Marcus said. "Then try harder," Elena said. She was already heading toward the door. "I'll see you after the surgery." She left before he could respond, and Marcus was left alone on the terrace with the morning light and the piece of paper with her number written in black ink, and the strange new feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was finally moving toward something instead of away from it. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of Marcus's life. The preoperative workup was thorough and invasive in ways he hadn't anticipated. He spent 2 days at UCSF Medical Center doing tests, blood work, genetic screening, cardiac evaluation, pulmonary function tests. He met with a psychiatrist who asked him extensively about depression and suicide risk and whether he understood the gravity of the decision he was making. He did understand. That was the part that kept surprising him. There were moments when he wanted to call and cancel, when the reality of the surgery, the very real possibility that they would put him under anesthesia and cut into his spine and potentially make things worse, became too heavy to carry. But then he would pull out the piece of paper with Elena's number, and something in him would settle. He didn't call her. He was honoring her request, the boundary she'd set, but just knowing he could call was somehow enough. His mother visited twice. She brought flowers the first time, a stack of books the second time, memoirs of people who'd survived injuries and come back stronger. She didn't push, she just was there. Solid, present, loving him in the quiet way that had probably always been there, and he'd been too angry to notice. Sandra prepared meals he didn't eat. She helped him with his physical therapy, pushing him harder than his actual physical therapist did, which meant she was pushing him harder than anyone had in 2 years. His upper body strength continued to improve. The muscles in his shoulders and arms became more defined. He started to look less like a man in decline and more like someone preparing for battle. Because that's what this was, he realized. This was war. Not against his body, but against the part of himself that had given up. 2 days before the surgery, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He went outside. Not onto the terrace. He spent most of his time there anyway, but into the yard, down the sloped driveway, to the edge of the property where the land opened up toward the city. Sandra wheeled him down carefully over the smooth pavement he'd had installed years ago for aesthetic reasons and now served a practical purpose. The San Francisco autumn was perfect. 75 degrees, clear sky, the bay visible in the distance like a promise. He could smell eucalyptus and salt water and the green smell of grass that hadn't been watered in a few days. He sat there for an hour, just existing in the world instead of behind glass. That evening his phone rang. It was Elena. "Hi," she said. "I'm calling in my capacity as your surgeon to make sure you understand what's happening tomorrow. You've stopped eating solid food at midnight, right? Your pre-medication arrives at 6 a.m. and the surgical team will come get you at 7. You should be in the OR by 7:45. "I understand," Marcus said. "And you're not having any last-minute doubts?" Elena's voice was carefully professional, but he could hear something underneath it. "I'm terrified," Marcus said, "but not doubting." "Good," Elena said. There was a pause. "I'm going to take care of you tomorrow. You're going to be asleep, so you won't know it. But I'm going to spend 6 to 8 hours of my life making sure that you get the best possible outcome. And then you're going to wake up and you're going to be in pain and you're going to want to die. But you're not going to, because you're stronger than you think." "How do you know that?" "Because," Elena said, and now there was something in her voice that broke the professional veneer slightly. "Because you called me at sunrise. Because you chose to try even though trying could fail. Because you sat in your wheelchair and made a different choice than the one you've been making for 2 years. That takes strength, Marcus. It's the strength you're going to need tomorrow." "Elena," he started. "No," she interrupted gently. "Not yet. Tomorrow, after you're awake, after the anesthesia wears off, after you understand what it's going to feel like to have your body touched by the surgery, we can talk about other things. But tonight, we don't. Tonight, you're my patient, and I'm your doctor, and this is the line." "And after?" Marcus asked. "After I'm recovered?" "Then we figure it out," Elena said. "If you still want to. If the feeling is still there. But for now, you need to rest. Tomorrow is going to change everything, and you need to be ready for that." She hung up before he could respond. Marcus sat in the darkness of his room, phone in his hand, and realized that he was shaking, not from fear of the surgery, though there was that, but from something else, from hope maybe, from the possibility that on the other side of this, there could be more than just recovery. There could be someone. There could be her. He set an alarm for 11:30 p.m., and when it went off, he made sure to drink a full glass of water one last time, before midnight. Small act of control, before surrendering to the process entirely. And then he tried to sleep, though sleep didn't come until just before the pre-medication arrived, at 6 a.m., right on schedule. The pre-medication made everything fuzzy around the edges. Marcus was aware of things happening, nurses moving around him, asking him to confirm his name and date of birth for the millionth time, inserting an IV line into his arm with competent efficiency. But it all felt like it was happening to someone else, someone watching from a great distance. He was wheeled through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and hope. His mother held his hand until they reached the doors to the surgical wing, where she had to let go. She kissed his forehead and told him she loved him, and Marcus tried to tell her he loved her too. But the words came out slurred and strange. The operating room was colder than he expected, brighter. There were 6 people in there already, all wearing surgical masks, all moving with the choreography of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Equipment he didn't recognize lined the walls. Monitors beeped with a steady rhythm that made him think of heartbeats, of life continuing even when everything else stopped. And then Elena was there, visible only from her eyes because the rest of her face was covered by mask and surgical hood. But he recognized those eyes immediately. The dark brown, the intensity, the focus that seemed to encompass everything in the room except him. "Hi, Marcus," she said, and her voice was muffled but warm. "You're about to go to sleep now. When you wake up, the hard part will be over. You're going to be okay. Promise? He managed to say, though it came out more like a question mark than a word. I promise, Elena said. She was preparing something, her hands moving with practiced precision. Now count backwards from 10 for me. 10, Marcus said. 9, 8. The number 7 never made it out of his mouth. There are very few things that are truly empty in human experience. The void of dreamless sleep is one of them. It's not darkness. Darkness has dimension, has presence. This was absence, complete, total, absolute absence. And then slowly, there was something else. Pain. Not sharp pain. That would come later, but a deep, aching, all-encompassing pain that lived in the core of his spine and radiated outward. He became aware of it before he became aware of anything else. The pain, and then the knowledge that he was alive enough to feel pain, and then the terrifying realization that this meant the surgery was over. Consciousness came in fragments. He could hear voices, professional, calm, discussing things he couldn't quite pass. Vitals, bleeding, motor function, the words washed over him without taking root. He tried to move and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in his body was screaming. His surgical site felt like someone had lit it on fire and then poured acid on the flames. His throat felt like it was lined with gravel. His mouth tasted like copper and nothing good. Don't try to move, a voice said. Female, familiar, but not Elena. A nurse, probably. You're in recovery. The surgery is finished. Everything went well. Everything went well. The words didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Marcus tried to ask a question, but all that came out was a sound like an injured animal. Here, the nurse said, and she was adjusting something, and suddenly his mouth didn't feel quite so much like a desert. A sip of water, cool and miraculous. Better? He managed to nod, which sent a fresh wave of pain through his neck and shoulders. His body was a geography of hurt, each region distinct and unique in its misery. Dr. Rojas will be here in a few minutes, the nurse said. She's in a meeting with your family, but she wanted me to tell you that everything went perfectly. 7 hours, minimal bleeding, optimal reconstruction. You should be very pleased. Marcus wasn't capable of being pleased about anything. He was barely capable of existing. But he understood in some distant way that this was good news, that he'd made it, that the surgery was done and he was alive, and that meant everything else was just recovery. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time was strange in the recovery room. He drifted in and out of consciousness, never fully awake, never fully asleep. At some point, someone moved him to a proper hospital room. He remembered hands, many hands, carefully shifting him from one bed to another, the journey an odyssey of pain, despite everyone's gentleness. His mother was there when he finally achieved something resembling full consciousness. She was sitting in a chair beside his bed, reading a book, and when she looked up and saw that his eyes were open and tracking, she made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Hello, darling," she said, setting down her book. She reached for his hand carefully, like he might break. "Welcome back." "Surgery?" he managed to croak. "Perfect," his mother said. "Elena, Dr. Rojas." She came out and told us everything went exactly as planned. 7 hours, minimal complications. She said she'll come see you this evening once you're more awake. Marcus nodded, which hurt. Everything hurt. He was beginning to understand that this was going to be his baseline for the foreseeable future. Pain, with occasional breaks for more pain. "How long?" he asked. "You've been asleep for about 4 hours, his mother said. "It's 2 in the afternoon, Sunday." 4 hours. It felt like both 4 minutes and 4 days. His mother helped him take small sips of water. She adjusted his pillows, very carefully, because the pillows were the enemy of his spine right now. She held his hand and talked about inconsequential things. The weather, something funny that had happened in one of her book clubs, the fact that his physical therapist had already come by and been very excited about something she called baseline motor response. Marcus didn't ask what that meant. He was too tired to ask. He drifted back to sleep sometime around 3, his mother's hand still in his. Elena appeared sometime after dinner, which Marcus didn't eat, because the thought of food was somehow more terrifying than the surgery had been. She was no longer in scrubs. She wore dark jeans and a soft blue sweater, and her hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. She looked tired in the way that people look tired after they've spent the entire day concentrating very hard on something that required all of their attention. She looked beautiful. "Hi," she said, pulling up a chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Marcus managed. His throat was less sandpapery now, but speaking still felt like an accomplishment. "A small truck. An efficient truck that knew what it was doing." Elena smiled. "That's actually a very good sign. Pain is preferable to numbness. It means everything is waking up." "Everything is extremely awake," Marcus said. "Everything is awake and angry." "That will pass," Elena said. She was checking his monitors, looking at the bandage on his back, which he couldn't see but could definitely feel. "You're doing great. Your motor response is excellent. You're moving your toes and your feet with more control than I expected at this stage. Your vitals are stable. Everything is proceeding normally." "Normally?" Marcus repeated. "Normal includes this level of pain?" "Yes," Elena said simply. "Normal includes severe pain for the next several weeks. Normal includes morphine and Percocet and physical therapy that will make you want to murder your physical therapist. Normal includes dark thoughts about why you agreed to this in the first place, but normal also includes, about 4 to 6 weeks from now, a significant decrease in pain, and then about 3 months from now, actual progress. And then, maybe, a life that looks different from the one you had before." She was sitting now in the chair beside his bed, her professional mask back in place, but with tiny cracks showing through it. He could see the exhaustion around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "You stayed the whole time?" he asked. "I did," Elena confirmed. 7 hours and 43 minutes. Every single second of it. That's a long time to concentrate. "It is," Elena said. She was looking at him now, really looking at him, and something in her expression softened. "But you were worth it. And now you're going to spend the next 6 months proving that you made the right decision. That's how this works. You trusted me with your body. Now you have to trust yourself with the process." "That sounds terrible," Marcus said. "It is," Elena agreed. "But also, it's going to change your life. And not in the way you think. Not necessarily in the way that you'll be walking, but in the way that you'll have fought for something and won. That changes a person." She stood, and Marcus felt a spike of panic. "You're leaving?" "I have to," Elena said. "You need rest. And I need to go home and sleep for approximately 14 hours. But your mother is still here, and there's a nurse station just outside your room, and if anything goes wrong, anything at all, you press that button." She was already at the door, and Marcus found himself gripping the bed rail with his left hand, even though it hurt, even though it was stupid. "Elena," he said. She turned back. "Thank you," he said, "for not letting me give up, for pushing, for all of it." Elena smiled, and it was sad and beautiful, and full of something he didn't quite have a name for. That's what people do when they care about someone, Marcus. They push, they fight, they don't let them give up even when giving up seems like the kindest option. She left before he could respond. The next 3 days were a blur of pain management and small victories. On Monday, he managed to sit up slightly, just enough to see the bandage on his back in a mirror, which was a mistake. It looked like someone had tried to assemble him and given up partway through. On Tuesday, he took his first steps with a walker, assisted by his physical therapist, a man named Derek, who looked like he could bench press a small car and had the personality of one too. 4 steps, that was all. But 4 steps with intact spinal cord reconstruction was 4 steps more than he'd managed in 2 years. On Wednesday, he managed 6 steps. Elena didn't come back to the hospital. His mother mentioned that she'd called once, asking for an update, and that Sandra had texted that Elena wanted to know how physical therapy was progressing. But she maintained the professional distance, the boundary she'd set. Marcus understood. He didn't like it, but he understood. On Thursday, he was discharged. His mother drove him back to the mansion, helping him carefully transfer from the car to his wheelchair. His surgical site was still heavily bandaged, still incredibly painful. But the IV was out, the catheter was out, and he was home. That meant something. Sandra had prepared his room, fresh linens, a clear path for his wheelchair, everything positioned for someone in recovery. She'd also prepared meals he couldn't eat, and books he couldn't focus on, and a general aura of worried care that he appreciated more than he could express. "Dr. Rojas sent something," Sandra said, handing him a package that had arrived while he was in the hospital. It was a book. The title was The Boy Who Learned to Run Again, and it was a memoir by someone named James Chen about his recovery from a spinal cord injury. The inscription on the inside read, in handwriting he recognized immediately, for Marcus. When the pain feels too big to overcome, remember that pain is how we know we're alive, and being alive is the whole point. He read the inscription 4 times, maybe 5. Then he called her. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for him to call. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," Marcus said back. His voice was rough from disuse and pain medication. "I got the book. I thought you might find it helpful," Elena said. "James Chen is one of my success stories. He came to me completely convinced his life was over. Now he runs marathons. He has full mobility," Marcus said, having immediately flipped to the author bio. "He does," Elena confirmed. "But that took him 2 years. 2 years of physical therapy, of pain, of moments when he wanted to quit. You're at day 5. You're going to feel like it's impossible. But it's not. It's just hard. And you're the kind of person who can do hard things." "How do you know that?" Marcus asked. "Because," Elena said, and her voice was quiet now, "because you called me at sunrise. Because you chose to try when trying could fail. Because you're still here, still fighting, still moving forward, even though it's agony. Those are the things that strong people do. And you're strong, Marcus. You just needed the surgery to remind you." "I miss you," Marcus said, ignoring her earlier instruction about not calling just to talk to her. "I know I'm not supposed to say that, but I miss you." There was a long pause. "I miss you too," Elena said finally, "but you're my patient right now. You need me to be your doctor more than you need me to be anything else. Can you wait? Can you get through the next few months and come out the other side, and then we figure out what this is?" "How many months?" Marcus asked. 6, Elena said. "Maybe fewer, depending on your progress, but at least 6 before you're no longer actively in recovery. After that, after you're walking, after you're independent, after you've proven to yourself that you made the right choice, then maybe we can talk about other things." It wasn't ideal, but it was something. It was a promise, buried in the structure of professional responsibility. "Okay," Marcus said, "I can wait 6 months." "I know you can," Eleanor said. "You're stronger than you think, Marcus. You're going to be fine, better than fine. You're going to be extraordinary." She hung up after that, and Marcus was left alone with the book and the promise and the pain that was starting to feel, now, like it might mean something. The first time Marcus walked without a walker, Eleanor wasn't there to see it. That was intentional. They'd agreed, professionally, via email exchanges that were carefully neutral and signed with initials instead of names, that she would maintain distance during his active recovery. She was his surgeon, his doctor, the person responsible for his medical outcomes. She couldn't also be the person he was falling in love with. Those roles contradicted each other, so she stayed away. And Marcus, against all odds, didn't fall apart. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He fought. Physical therapy became his new obsession. Derek, the personal trainer masquerading as a physical therapist, pushed him with a relentlessness that bordered on cruel, but Marcus pushed back harder. He worked on balance, on strength, on the neurological pathways that had to be retrained to accommodate his reconstructed spine. He fell a lot. His first unassisted step lasted approximately 2 seconds before his legs betrayed him and gravity took over. But then he got up and he tried again. By week 8, he was walking with a cane. By week 12, he was walking without assistive devices. Unsteadily, carefully, but walking. Actual walking. The kind where you moved your legs and your body cooperated and you ended up somewhere different from where you started. His mother cried the first time she watched him walk across the living room under his own power. Sandra made special celebrations of it, elaborate meals that he still struggled to eat. But the gesture mattered. His physical therapist high-fived him like they'd won the lottery. But the person he wanted to tell didn't get to know. Not directly. That was the deal. Instead, he updated his medical files. Elena would see the progress notes. She would know that he was walking. She would understand, in the clinical way of doctors reviewing patient charts, that the surgery had been a success. It wasn't enough, but it would have to be. Marcus also did something else during those 4 months. He rebuilt his life. Not the life he'd had before. That life was gone, irrevocably changed by what had happened to his spine. But a different life, one that existed after the surgery, after the pain, after the long, dark period of waiting. He started going to the office again, 3 days a week. His company had continued to function without him. His CFO was competent. But there was satisfaction in returning to something he'd built. The stairs were still a challenge, but there was an elevator. The parking lot was still treacherous, but there was a cane. He was learning that limitations didn't have to mean the end of things. They just meant finding different ways to do them. He also started dating again. Not seriously. Just dinners with women his mother fixed him up with. Casual drinks with colleagues who were shocked to see him alive and functional and seemingly willing to engage with the world again. None of it stuck. None of it mattered. Because he was waiting, whether consciously or not, for someone specific. 4 months and 3 days after the surgery, Dr. Elena Rojas released him from active medical care. The appointment was on a Friday afternoon. Marcus drove himself, his first time driving since before the accident. His legs were strong enough, his reaction time was solid, and the hand controls on the car that he'd had installed just in case turned out to be completely unnecessary. He drove with the windows down, the February air cool on his face, and tried not to think about what came next. Eleanor's office was in Pacific Heights, in a building that probably cost more per square foot than some people's houses. The waiting room was all clean lines and modern furniture and the kind of carefully curated calm that suggested wealth and expertise. Her office manager, a woman with the demeanor of someone who'd been guarding Elena's schedule for approximately 10 years, smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Ashford, Dr. Rojas is ready for you," she said, which seemed impossible given that it was exactly his appointment time. He actually walked without a cane, without assistance, to her office door. Elena was standing behind her desk when he entered, reviewing a chart. She looked exactly the same as she had 4 months ago, which was somehow surprising. He'd imagined her changing, had imagined that the months would have altered her in visible ways, but she was still Elena. Dark hair, capable hands, that intensity in her eyes that made you feel like she was seeing directly into your soul. She looked up, and he watched her process what she was seeing, him standing, walking, mobile, independent. "Wow," she said simply. "Hi," Marcus said. He was suddenly irrationally nervous. "I can walk." "I can see that," Elena said. A smile was playing at the corner of her mouth. "You look good, strong, healthy." "I am healthy," Marcus said. "That's kind of the point, right? The surgery worked. I'm recovered. I'm released. I'm free." "You are," Elena said. She was moving around the desk now, not toward him, but not away from him either. "The progress notes have been remarkable. Derek said you're the most determined patient he's worked with in 5 years. I was motivated, Marcus said, by the surgery, by the desire to regain mobility. No, Marcus said, by a person. But I wasn't allowed to think about that person while I was recovering, so I thought about walking instead. And I got very, very good at walking. Elena's expression shifted, something subtle and profound, like a door opening. Marcus, I'm not your patient anymore, Marcus interrupted. You said that was the condition. That once I was recovered, once I was independent, once I'd proven I made the right choice, then we could figure out what this is. So I'm here, recovered, independent, ready to figure it out. Are you? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. She was looking at him like she was seeing him for the first time, not as a patient, not as a case study, but as a person. A whole person, standing in her office, ready to be something more than doctor and patient. I've been terrible at maintaining the professional distance, she said finally. For your information, I've read your progress notes approximately 700 times. I've driven by your office building twice, for no reason. I've asked your mother, via a very casual conversation at a charity event, how you were doing. I've been a complete mess. Good, Marcus said. That makes me feel less alone in this. Eleanor crossed her arms, but she was smiling now. I'm supposed to be professional. I'm supposed to maintain boundaries. I'm supposed to be the careful one, the one who remembers that doctor-patient relationships are complicated and require careful navigation. And yet, Marcus said. And yet, Elena agreed. She uncrossed her arms. Here's the thing. I remember exactly what it felt like when you called me at sunrise. I remember exactly what it felt like to spend 7 hours trying to fix your spine. I remember every single moment of wanting you to be okay more than I wanted to be careful, and I'm tired of being careful. She walked toward him then, closing the distance between them in the office where they'd first met, where she'd called him an asshole, and he'd hated her for it. And somehow, in the months since, that had transformed into something else. I'm Elena, she said, extending her hand, and I think we should start over without the medical charts, without the professional distance. Just start over. Marcus took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he pulled her closer. She resisted for just a second, old habits, old boundaries, and then surrendered to it. I'm Marcus, he said, and I've been waiting 4 months to do this. He kissed her. It was gentle, because he was still healing, still careful with his spine, still aware that his body had limits. But it was real. It was honest. It was the thing they'd both been avoiding by maintaining that careful, professional distance. When they broke apart, Elena was laughing, that unguarded laugh he loved. That, she said, was incredibly inappropriate in a professional setting. Good thing you just released me as your patient, Marcus said. Yes, good thing, Eleanor said. She was still holding his hand, like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. So what now? Now, Marcus said, I think you let me take you to dinner. An actual dinner, not a consultation. And I tell you about the last 4 months, and you tell me about your life. And we see if this is something real or just something that happened because we were both in crisis and needed someone to lean on. I don't think it's the second thing, Elena said. Neither do I, Marcus said. But I think we should find out. Elena nodded slowly. There's a restaurant in North Beach, Italian. Really good pasta. My mother loves it. Your mother loves Italian food? My mother loves everything, Elena said, including the idea of me having a boyfriend. She's going to be insufferable about this, by the way. She's going to want to know everything about you. She's going to give you unsolicited medical advice. She's going to ask when you're planning to give her grandchildren. When does she want to meet me? Marcus asked. Elena laughed again. She already did. Your mother and my mother became friends at some point during your recovery. They've been texting. Of course they have, Marcus said. He was smiling despite, or because of, the fact that both their mothers had apparently conspired to force them together. That's kind of beautiful, actually. It's absolutely terrible, Elena said, but also kind of beautiful, yes. She locked up her office, and they walked together, actually walked, side by side, their hands linked, down the hallway toward the elevator. Her office manager waved goodbye with an expression that suggested she'd been waiting for this exact outcome for approximately 4 months. The elevator doors opened, and Marcus realized that he wasn't thinking about his legs, wasn't thinking about his spine, wasn't thinking about the accident or the chair or the 2 years of sitting on a terrace watching a view he thought he'd never really see. He was thinking about dinner, about this woman beside him who told him he was hibernating and had pushed him to wake up, about the strange alchemy of crisis and care and the possibility that sometimes, when you fight hard enough, you don't just survive, you actually get to live. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked as they descended. "How much I love Italian food," Marcus said. Elena squeezed his hand. "Liar, but I appreciate the effort." "Okay," Marcus admitted. "I'm thinking about how I spent 2 years waiting to not be afraid, and then you showed up and told me that fear was the whole point, that being alive meant being afraid sometimes, that fighting meant risking failure." "And?" Elena asked. "And I'm glad I listened to you," Marcus said. "I'm glad I called you at sunrise. I'm glad I did the surgery. I'm glad I walked across my living room 6 times, even though it hurt. I'm glad I got strong enough to be standing here right now, walking into an elevator with you, about to go to dinner at an Italian restaurant in North Beach, where I'm assuming your mother is going to show up coincidentally at some point." "Probably," Elena said. "She texted me an hour ago asking where I was." The elevator doors opened to the ground floor. They walked out into the February afternoon, where the light was starting to shift toward evening, toward something warmer and more gentle than midday. "I'm also glad," Marcus continued, "that you were mean to me during the consultation, that you called me a coward, that you didn't let me hide behind logic and fear." "I'm glad you listened when I was mean," Elena said. "Not everyone does." "I listened to you," Marcus said. "I think I've been listening to you since the moment you told me I was an asshole. I was just too afraid to admit what I was listening for." Elena stopped walking. They were at the corner of the building, right where the urban landscape opened up to the bay view, and she pulled him to face her. "This is real, right?" she asked. "This isn't just because I'm your doctor and you're grateful, or because I saved your life in some dramatic way." "You didn't save my life," Marcus said. "You opened the door. I had to be the one to walk through it. You know what's real? Real is that I got up at sunrise for 4 months because I was thinking about you. Real is that I pushed myself harder than I've ever pushed in my entire life because somewhere in the back of my mind I had this image of being whole again, of being someone you could be with who wasn't broken. Real is that I'm standing here on my own 2 feet, and the first person I wanted to be with was you." "Okay," Elena said softly. "Okay. That's real." She kissed him again, right there on the corner of Pacific Heights, with the bay behind them and the city stretching out before them and everything that had happened, the accident, the surgery, the pain, the recovery, all of it condensing into this moment of being alive and present and choosing someone to be alive and present with. When they broke apart, Marcus felt like he'd just run a marathon, exhausted and exhilarated and completely, utterly sure that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. "Come on," Elena said, taking his hand. "Let's go get Italian food. My mother is probably already there, ordering all the seafood to ensure you're getting enough omega-3s for spinal health." "Ah, I love your mother," Marcus said, and he meant it. "You will," Elena said. "Eventually. Right now you're going to think she's insane, but eventually you'll understand that it's just love in a very specific and extremely aggressive Italian-American form." They walked together down the hill toward North Beach, toward dinner and mothers and the kind of future that 4 months ago, when Marcus was sitting on a terrace watching a view that wasn't enough, seemed impossible. But that was the thing about being alive, he understood now. Impossible things happened all the time. You just had to be brave enough to fight for them. What did you think of the story? Share your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What was your score? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories and have fun.